Um, Heads up to everybody on the call, this is being recorded. What we do is we put this on our meetings tab on our website, so folks can watch this after. I will stop the recording after Luke's presentation, so the question and answer part is just really, you know, what people can feel comfortable with. But we are so lucky, we didn't know that we were going to get Luke until Friday, and but he's going to be our last leadership lunch speaker here. And we were talking earlier on about how timely this is, because we're really focusing on our workforce and shoring up the skills of who is out here on the peninsula, so we can be strong as we recover. And well, first make it through COVID and then recover from COVID. So Luke is the president of Peninsula College. He is a very active member of our business community. And Luke, we're so glad you're here today, and go ahead and take it away. Oh, Luke, I think you're muted still.
Now I'm live.
There you go.
Sorry about that. It's Zoom fatigue, I guess, which we're probably, a lot of us are feeling after being on Zoom day after day. But happy to be with you and share a little bit about what the college is doing, and maybe some things that are you know, on the horizon for us as a college, as a state agency, and but also talk a little bit about maybe some things to think about in terms of leadership in a time of pandemic, and how we adapt to some of the stuff that we're all struggling with. So let me share my screen, I hope.
Looks great.
Great, thank you. So, you know, we found ourselves where the school districts found themselves, and a lot of other businesses and a lot of other state agencies that provide service to folks found themselves in March, which is, you know, literally on Friday the 13th in March, we, the governor, you know, issued his executive order that closed down our colleges. And we were already sort of moving in that direction. It was right at the end of our winter quarter, and we were trying to encourage faculty and students to finish up their work, you know, right there at the end of the quarter as quickly as they could, because we anticipated something was probably going to happen. But you know, one of the things I got to say is we were, in one sense, it was kind of fortunate that it happened when it happened, because we were right at the end of one quarter, and we were able to extend our spring break by a week, which gave our faculty and staff a chance to really kind of make the pivot to remote and online instruction and services to students. And literally, I mean, I got to say, it was fantastic, because our faculty and staff made that pivot literally in 2 weeks, and that's not an easy thing to do. We are fortunate in that, you know, we've been doing online education for well over a decade. And in fact, our baccalaureate program, our bachelor's degree in applied science and business management, can be completed entirely online for folks who want to do that. So we had some core faculty that have been teaching online for years, and they were able to help out some of the faculty who maybe weren't quite as adept and skilled to kind of get their courses set up and transitioned. And you know, our student services made the pivot to doing things remotely and reaching out to students virtually. And I really got to hand it to the folks who did all that hard work. I mean, literally our IT staff was, you know, we had a drive up and we were handing out computers, laptops to students, and some faculty who, didn't have good internet. We were handing out hotspots and things like that. Lab folks were putting together, science lab kits and handing them out to students so that they could do lab work at home. So it was really a monumental task, but I just got to hand it to people that, faced with the crisis, they responded to the crisis in very positive ways. And now we kind of find ourselves, so, where are we and where do we go from here? So summer and fall quarters, our summer courses are usually predominantly online in a normal summer. So in this summer, we're just really continuing that scenario moving forward. Our fall quarter, we made the decision back in June that we would be predominantly remote and online for the fall, with some face-to-face instruction for programs that need shop or lab time, like welding, allied health programs, construction trades, things like that. So, for those sorts of things where we're going to have people face-to-face, each one of those programs has a safety plan and a set of protocols in place. And we're, that comports with what the state health department and everybody is, saying that we need to be doing. So we'll have some people on campus in the fall, some faculty and staff. They'll all be masked when they come on campus. Anytime they're outside of their immediate office, they'll be wearing a mask. We're doing the, enhanced cleaning protocols. We actually, people sign in and sign out every time they come to campus, and we have what's called an attestation before they come to campus that says, I haven't been exposed, I'm not feeling, I'm feeling well today, etc. And all of that is obviously so that we could contact trace if we need to. So we're gathering some information to help us contact trace if such a scenario arises. So, as I said, any of the courses that are offered with some face-to-face components are going to also be required, obviously, to have a fallback plan, and probably fallback plan 1, fallback plan 2, in case we see a major wave, a second wave of infection, or something happens where we could go the other direction potentially and open up a little bit more. Right now we're not trending in the right direction in our county. So that's, when we first made the decision to be remote in June, we did that right at the 1st of June, and probably along about the middle of June, I was second guessing myself about that decision. I'm not second guessing that anymore. And so, it was one of those decisions. We made the best decision we could, and it turned out to be, I think, the right one, at least for the beginning of the quarter. So that's where we kind of are for summer and fall. We have a comprehensive safety plan in place for students and staff who will be on campus periodically through the fall, as I mentioned. The reason, this was that we felt like we needed to make that decision was because our students aren't just students. They are essential workers. They're mothers and fathers of school-age children. They're caregivers to aging family members, you name it. And the same is true for our faculty and staff. And so it really presents some interesting wrinkles when you're trying to create a safe environment. So the transmission vectors of a disease like this, like COVID-19, are multiple in that sort of a situation, and they're very complicated. Because we might have, for instance, students who come to class with us and go to 3 different classrooms in the course of the time they're with us. Then they go to work. Then they go pick up their kid from school and take that child to soccer practice or dance practice, dance recital or whatever, and then go home and take care of an aging parent. And so the possibilities for what happens when somebody leaves our campus are really complicated. And as the current news stories regarding higher ed outbreaks suggest, you can create a really safe campus environment, and that can be compromised very quickly by unsafe behavior on the part of folks when they are not on campus. And so one of the things for us to really be thinking about, and I think it applies to other, other organizations, to businesses and school districts, et cetera, is that you have to have this continuous kind of sense of situational awareness, and be really prepared to shift rapidly to some hopefully pre-planned alternatives faced with what's happening at any given moment or any given day within the cycle. So we don't know what things are going to be like in October. We don't know what things are going to be like in November, and so we have to, we're in a continuous process of planning for multiple possible realities, and then being prepared to act on those realities as we see them. So, one of the things that happened for us was that with the CARES Act, as you might imagine, we saw a fairly significant decline in enrollment in the spring, and it was just because people were, I don't know what to do, and I'm going to stay home and I'm trying to stay safe. And so, we saw a revenue decline, obviously, from that, because we weren't collecting tuition revenue and so on. Part of the CARES Act was targeted at higher education to try to address some of those situations that that Congress knew were going to be faced by higher education institutions. And so, as part of that funding, the two-year colleges in the state of Washington received almost $91 million in CARES Act funding. Peninsula received a little over 1.1 million of that. And it was in two equal parts. So we got $580,000 that was earmarked for direct emergency aid to students. And that was designed to help students pay bills, buy books, do the sorts of things that they needed to do, particularly those students who were suddenly unemployed as a result of the pandemic. We've dispersed all but about $30,000 of that money already. Through the spring and into the summer quarter. Our foundation also authorized the limited use of some of their reserves to provide emergency funds for students that were really in a pinch, and we thank them for that. So there was another equal amount, about $580,000, that was intended for the college to use to pay for expenses that have been incurred by COVID-19. So technology buys, buying enhanced PPE, doing enhanced cleaning of spaces where people are present, those sorts of things. So we got some money to actually respond to some of those needs that we had. And then the governor has an additional pot of money that's called the Emergency Education Recovery Funds, and we'll be receiving some of that money. We're not exactly sure how much yet, but that's intended to basically backfill lost revenue from the spring quarter and into the fall. We don't know what our enrollment is going to be for the fall. It's impossible to predict, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But we expect that it's very likely that our enrollment will be down again in the fall, just as people are still kind of trying to stay close to home and trying to stay safe, and basically reassessing some of their options, in this environment that they find themselves in. Which brings us, sort of to a state budget. And before I go to that, let me also say, because Angie, you pointed it out, and it's something to talk about with everybody who's on. The two-year colleges are going to be critical to the long-term recovery of the state, to the economy in the state of Washington. And I think we all recognize that this really significant disruption is going to result in some long-term economic challenges, and that there are going to be some businesses that don't survive. There are going to be some sectors that are very significantly negatively impacted by COVID long term. And so, worker retraining is going to be really important. And that's something that we're very committed to. And there is funding available from the state for worker retraining. And we want to make sure that, businesses in the area who, workers who've been displaced by, by this disruption in the economy, reach out to us and to our worker retraining and workforce development areas to help us connect those folks with resources that are available to help them. We are able, I think, in ways that for instance, four-year universities are less able to do. We're able to be a little more nimble and a little more quick in terms of responding to local needs. And so one of the things we're really interested in is hearing from business and industry about what their needs are. And so we're hoping that the chambers and the EDC and other groups can help us with that and provide us with information and connect us with folks that need to talk to us, so that we can. What we want to do is we're here to provide service. That's part of our mission, and providing a trained workforce and maintaining a trained workforce is a critical piece of what our mission is. And so we want to do everything we can to be good partners with that. So please reach out to us if there's things that we can help with. Back to the state budget. So worker retraining and all this other sort of stuff gets complicated by the fact that our state budget is a mess. That's a highly technical economic term. But there it is. State revenue, has been largely non-existent since mid-March. Their estimates that we're seeing right now, suggest a $4.5 billion shortfall for this year's budget, and another $4.3 billion shortfall for the 21-23 biennium, which will be the subject of the legislative session come January. Right now, our state's reopening trajectory has been paused because of the uptick in cases, and we're not on the road we would prefer to be on towards a more rapid reopening of the economy. The state's reserves are insufficient to backfill that lost revenue. And as of right now, there's no special session planned to address the shortfall, which you can see by my punctuation marks at the end of there, is a little bit puzzling. If we really think we're going to have a serious shortfall, then it would seem that we would want to be talking about that and trying to make some decisions. The Office of Financial Management, to speak to that more specifically, has asked all agencies to make contingency plans for a 15% reduction to the state appropriation this year. And for our college, that would be $1.9 million from a budget that we have already approved, right? That the board approved in June. And K-12 districts, everybody else who's a state agency or who gets state funding is also, kind of wargaming that same possible scenario. And so that's something that's very concerning for us. That's what we know about the budget as of today. What we don't know, how quickly and how strongly might the economy recover when it comes back in? How big might our allocation cut be if we get one, and when do we get it is the other significant point. A 15% allocation reduction in January, halfway through a budget year, actually is more like a 30% allocation reduction, because you only have a very short period of time to realize that savings. We don't know whether enrollment will be up or down, frankly. And that's, that's one way we generate revenues from tuition dollars. What are students going to do? And that's a tough one to answer in this environment. We don't know how many high school seniors who just graduated and who accepted, admission to a four-year college or university are sitting here today thinking, do I really want to go do that this fall? And is that university going to be open for 2 weeks like the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and then close? And parents are asking, do I really want to pay that tuition to do that? So it's really hard to tell whether enrollment is going to be flat. Is it going to be up? Is it going to be down? Are high school students going to be, some high school students be more interested in Running Start than maybe they were before? It's hard to tell. So, that's a crapshoot, and we just don't know what's going to happen with it. The other big question mark, and this may be one of the reasons I think why we're not talking so much about a special session right now for the legislature, is I think everybody is hoping there's more money coming in another package from the federal government, either the HEROES Act or something similar to that. There was a significant amount of money earmarked in the HEROES Act, which passed the House, for higher education. And as everybody knows, that's been languishing in the Senate and is probably going to continue to do that, at least for the near future. So we're waiting to see what happens with that. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of thinking about what happens in the next several months, moving towards the new year and the start of the legislative session. I thought, might be appropriate to, offer some thoughts on leadership in the time of COVID. Leadership was one thing in the before time, which is what I refer to, before COVID, and some things got really brought into pretty sharp focus by the onset of this pandemic. And I think some of this stuff is old stuff, but I think it bears repeating as we think about how we move forward in this. First of all, the pandemic is a case study in disruptive change. Rapid, sudden, disruptive change that forces itself into an economic system or an ecosystem, and it upsets the status quo in profound and very sudden ways. And because of that, the taken for granted assumptions about who we are as organizations and how we function in the broader, economic system and everything else, and our organizational values get challenged by that disruptive change. One of the aspects of rapid disruptive change is a healthy injection of ambiguity. And by that, I mean the tools that we used, the predictive tools, the planning tools that we used in the before time may not have any real value in the environment that we currently find ourselves in. So for instance, if this was a normal year, we would be getting a pretty good idea by now in mid-August of what our enrollment was going to be for the fall. And I see Jim, on the same thing for a K-12 district, right? By this time, you would have it down to probably within 5 or 6 students, how many students you were going to have in the Sequim School District for the fall. That's out the window right now because we just don't know what's going to happen. The things we would use to predict the budget don't necessarily apply anymore in the environment that we're in. And so we're faced with these things that we would like to be able to have some data and some predictive tools to use, and those tools just don't work. And so most of us don't like a lot of ambiguity. We don't like uncertainty. We don't like the gray areas. We like predictability, and that's causing some real issues for us as individuals and as organizations. And so that leads to high levels of stress, both for leaders and for members of the organization. And the fact of the matter is that organisms and organizations crave stasis and equilibrium. And those are two things we do not have right now. There is no stasis and there is no equilibrium. And so that's why if we are all saying, yeah, we're feeling just not quite right, that's one of the reasons that because we're craving some predictability, and there just isn't any right now. And obviously, stress can lead to what would seem to be out of character behavior, and sometimes really, at least on the surface, what seem to be really bizarre decisions in the short term that you have to unpack and understand within the context of where we are today. And that's some of the short-term stuff. And longer term, I think there's, that stress can have long-term damage, negative impacts on both people and organizations. One of the things I'm really concerned about right now, and going into the fall quarter, is the mental health and psychic health of our students and our faculty and our staff, because this is wearing on us all. And it's something that we're going to, as leaders, have to be aware of and actively try to work on with our organizations. This is something for us all to maybe think about. A situation like this creates an environment where our espoused values, and by espoused values, I mean, that's what we say we believe, right? That's what we say we value. And our operational values, which is what we really value and what we act upon, they are exposed for what they really are. In an environment where there's stasis and equilibrium and everything, it's easy for organizations to talk a good game. Oh, we're all about equity. We're all about inclusion. We're all about, serving our fellow man. Now we're now it's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's where, is that an espoused value, or is that really an operational value of the organization? And if it is, what is the organization doing to operationalize those values? And so I think that's something that we can all, within our organizations and within ourselves personally, we can look at and say, is that something I say I believe, or is it something I really believe and value? And if it is, what am I doing about it? Or what's my organization about it? So the question is, what are the core values that inform your organization and create its culture? Because those values are what ultimately determines how the organization behaves in an environment like this. True colors, if you will. So those core values are going to drive operations. And it's important, in my opinion, it's important that they be the right values. And I'm not saying these are the right values for everybody, but I'm saying these might be some values that an organization has. And now's the time to examine, and ask the question, do we really believe this? And if we really believe this, what are we doing about it? So concern for the well-being of employees and clients and customers. A commitment to continuing to deliver high quality goods and services at a fair price. And that may sound weird coming from an educational leader, but that's what we do. We provide a high quality service to our to clients, right? recognizing the importance of equity, especially in a time of crisis. One of the things that keeps me up at night right now is the fact that this particular pandemic has thrown into sharp relief, sharp focus, the fact that some people have access to technology and can continue learning and others don't. And so that digital divide has suddenly, it was always there. It was always there. Now it's suddenly very clear who has and who has not. And so brings into the whole, question, internet access, even if you have internet access, if you only have one laptop in your family and your kid's trying to go to school and you're trying to go to school and you're trying to run a business with one laptop, how's that working for you? Probably not very well. Giving back to the community by paying it forward. If that's something that your organization really believes in, then what's happening with that right now? I think just some closing thoughts. Recognize that disruptive change can be an opportunity to innovate, because the status quo doesn't work anymore. So it's an opportunity to think outside the box and to say, okay, let's try something different. What's the worst that could happen? And so we're asking lots of questions about that at the college right now. There are certain things that we took for granted that we thought, okay, that's the way it ought to be. And now we're beginning to say, well, maybe that's not the way it ought to be. Maybe there's some other ways of thinking about some of the things that we do. I think it's important to attend to the urgent, but to keep a focus on the important. In other words, there are fires that we're all going to be putting out between, in the near future related to this pandemic. But it's also important to keep a focus on where are we going? Where do we want to be in 5 years? Stephen Covey, that was one of his mantras, that the urgent drives out the important if we allow it to. And then what you end up being is just reactive. You're not being strategic. So I think it's important to keep the strategic focus. I think it's really important right now that we attend to both the emotional and the physical well-being of ourselves, and also the people that we care about and that we work with every day. I don't know how else to say it, but to say it this way, I think it's really important that we practice the art of extending grace to others and to ourselves in this time. I don't know about you, but it's really easy for me to get frustrated with the situation that I find myself in, and then by extrapolation with the people that I find myself with. And I think it's really important that we understand that when people are frustrated and they may be, stressed out and they may be acting out a little bit, that there are reasons why people are struggling right now. Really real reasons why they're struggling. We were talking about this in our leadership team this morning at the college, because I've got a couple of folks that are, real leaders on our campus that are right now struggling with, how do I continue to do my job and homeschool or remote school my kid and X, Y, Z, on and on and on. And oh, by the way, I'm working at home and so is my significant other, and we don't have enough broadband, we don't have a robust enough broadband bandwidth. So I think it's important for us to really take a step back and say, okay, I'm struggling, other people are struggling, and extend that grace to other people and just say, okay, I get it. There's an old Scottish proverb that says, listen twice before you speak once. I think we could all take that to heart right now too. Listen to what other people are actually saying and really try to understand it before we try to, fix things for people. I'm a Tolkien geek, right? And there's a point in The Lord of the Rings where Frodo, in a very, very dark place, both literally and figuratively, in the mines of Moria, and he's reflecting back on what has been just dumped in his lap, which is literally what we've got with COVID. It just got dumped in our lap. And he says, I wish none of this had ever happened. And Gandalf, in his wisdom, says, so does everybody who lived to see such times. That's not for us to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that's given to us. And so right now, I guess that's a question for you. What do we decide to do with the time that is given us in this situation? So what have we learned from our current situation that we can carry forward as a positive into the future? First of all, that's a big general question. But a more specific one, what is uniquely mine or yours or ours to do today, right now, to respond to where we are in this place and in this time that we find ourselves living in? I think that's a profound question that we ought to ask ourselves probably every day when we get up and start our work. So some thoughts on leadership, and I'm happy to listen to, let's have a conversation if we have some time.
Thank you so much, Luke. I'm sitting here going, this is exactly what I needed to hear right now, because everything that you have raised, about what is happening at the college and how we all fit together in a community, this is really resonant. And the fact that you brought Tolkien into it, oh my goodness. I was having a moment. Because I recently said that I was waiting for Gandalf to come take me away on my adventure that I might not return from. Mm-hmm. But that's the escapism of coping with these challenges. Mm-hmm. And it also really spoke to me, I think of how we're all little nesting dolls together. And so the K-12 system nests in with the college system, which nests into our service industry and even our professional workforce. I started my career as a student at Peninsula College. I was in the early childhood education program, which now is like, oh my gosh, so important. And, mm-hmm. We're looking at these barriers to participation. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. You are an excellent speaker. I feel like you could do a second career right now as a motivational speaker with this topic.
It's as much self-talk, Angie, as it is, talk to anybody else. I really think we have to be our own. We have to be our own cheerleaders in this.
Yeah.
And we have to kind of buck ourselves up before we can, we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of other folks. But, I do think this, if there was ever a time for us to, really focus on important principles of interpersonal relationship, like do unto others as you would be done to. And, that Scottish, proverb, listen twice before you speak once. I think now's the time to try to really put those things into practice, because I think one of the things that we're really missing in all of this is just we're understanding how profound human connections are and how important they are to who we are and how we see the world. And we've been cut off from all of that, for the last, 6 months. And, it's interesting to me that when we, like if we have a Zoom meeting, for the college, we try to sort of deliberately start at 15 minutes, before we actually start, just to give people time to kind of, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you. And, I haven't seen you for so long, and give some people just some time to kind of catch up and try to do some reconnection. So, The other thing I would say too is, and you know, I'm sure I sound like a broken record on this because you hear it all the time, but I'm going to say it anyway. If we want to go back to school, if we want our businesses to open, if we want to be able to go down to, the restaurant, and have a nice drink and a dinner with our friends and etc., get back to some semblance of normal, we got to do what we got to do, which is wear a mask, do the hand hygiene, maintain social distance, and don't go to parties, people. Don't go to parties right now. It's crazy. I'm sorry, but that's just, it's the least we can do for the people, for everybody else. And it's not at this point, it's not about me, it's not about you, it's about the other people in our community. How do we serve how can we be servants to the other people in our community? And I tell this story to folks, but I think it's especially pertinent today. My parents were married on December 7th, 1941. Now, if you're a history person, that was the day the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, right?
Yeah.
Within 6 months, right? My mom is expecting my older brother, and my dad is enlisting. And in 1943, he ships out for England to work in a general hospital. And he doesn't come home until 1946. She doesn't see him for 3 years, right? They grew up in the Depression. I can wear a mask when I go out. I can stay 6 feet away from people, right?
We got this. We've done bigger things.
You've done bigger, tougher, gnarlier things in the history of our country. And this is a chance for us to do what we need to do.
Thank you. That's perfect.
And if that makes folks, prickle, I'm sorry, but that's my soapbox.
A great soapbox to be on. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording right now. And